Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm a bit new to this new platform, so I was not sure if you're on. Thank you all for joining for our first episode of this very interesting, what's going to be a very interesting conversation. The the topic is called Chronicles of Soft Power, where gentle meets fierce. My idea of starting this conversation was really to capture the stories, insights that experienced tenured leaders who spent years facing many challenges, overcoming, achieving great results, creating new products, new platforms, um, and doing all of that with the not with while being hard nosed about the outcome, while being hard nosed about their business goals that they're chasing, but they've done so by galvanizing a group of people to go with them, to support them, primarily based on their soft power, their ability with people, their strength, power of their empathy, power of their ability to really motivate and drive and bring the best out of people. And what are really those insights we as leaders can capture, primarily focused on the future where it's an increasingly automated world. Every second day, there's some article by someone saying about how AI is going to do that and AI is going to do this. And therefore, from a leader standpoint, it's about navigating and achieving results through this flux. From a junior standpoint, from a person who's starting off in their career or is somewhere in the middle, is really a wake-up call for them, saying tap into your softer power, tap into your what's essentially human about you, and tap into that human element. And that's where the source of the next wave of leadership lies. And therefore, and all of this you will not find in books and theories, but you will find in stories and inspiring episodes from leaders who've been there and done that. And I wanted to start this with the powerhouse that is Joy Bhattacharya. Siddhant, if you can bring Joy onto stage. Hi, Joy.
Hi
Good evening.
Bhaskar,
How are
good to
you?
be here.
It's always a pleasure to meet you. I really wanted to start this series with you because I've seen, having known you for over 2 decades now, I've seen how you've done multiple things, gone through from the Doordarshan era in broadcasting and production to where we are today, and being able to transition at each time to be able to achieve things in the difficult span of space of sports, which has its own evolution, to now having God knows gazillion followers on every social platform that you have. And I really wanted to use your take time with you and chat with you in a very informal manner and get some insights of how we can, as leaders, as as working professionals, what are some of the really insights which we might not find in books and theories that we can tap into, and record for ourselves as things to focus on. And for those of you who either don't follow sport or have been under the rock for the last 20 years, I just want to give you a short intro on Joy before we get started. Joy is now very much a public figure, primarily in the area of sports. Joy started his career in production. Then I met Joy first time when he was in ESPN Star Sports, where he was heading production. And then before I launched into my entrepreneurial phase, and then Joy moved on, headed production for National Geographic. And along the way, Joy has always had, I wouldn't call it a side hustle, but multiple passions that he was facing. He's one of India's most recognized quizzer, especially not just restricted to sports. And that's something he's done over the last, I don't know, 30 years, right from his college days. I'm sure he's won many, many awards, and of course, lots of free food and chai in college days because of his quizzing and pocket money. And then after that, the interesting phase for me for Joy is when he moved into sports broadcasting. Then he moved into sports management, where he was famously the director of KKR and saw them through from, I think, second or last in the league to winning championships. And then he moved from there after the successful stint. Joy took over the huge, I can't even imagine how huge the challenge it might have been to be the director of the Under 17 World Cup, which India proudly hosted. It was such a fantastic event. And to pull so many difficult and divergent forces together to be able to pull off that event itself is I think a mini series, if not one session. And then now, as if that wasn't tough enough, Joy has taken on the mantle as the CEO of Prime Volleyball, where he is really giving volleyball uh, a lease of life, bringing it to the mainstream, and bringing international players and actually starting a league from scratch. 10 years from now, I'm sure, even if it may not reach the heights of cricket, but it will definitely reach a place that it wouldn't have but for Prime Volleyball. Of course, that's not it. Joy has written books. He's co-written a book on Dhoni. He's written many books on quizzes. He's famously co-written a book with his son, a fictional book called Junior Premier League. And so that's a little bit about Joy, and it's all of these stints that we're going to tap into when we have a chat with Joy. So, Joy, welcome to the show. Sorry it took that long. There is just so much to say about you.
No, thanks a ton. It's lovely to be here. And as I said, I think it's interesting to be able to discuss something with a focus. So one of the things is to, okay, just go over your career and say, okay, you've done this, you've done that. But the interesting one is if you have focus. And I was just thinking, and it didn't strike me before, that actually when you talk about soft power or your ability to be able to make decisions and get along with people, one of the first places you actually do that is in a quiz team. So typically in our college days, a quiz team used to be of 4 people. Okay. And you've got to figure out in the other four whose motivation is what, who wants to impress you in, and very often you're thrown together. Like what happens is generally you have a team which is set. But sometimes there's specialist quizzes, like there's a sports quiz or there's a, a film and music quiz. And a great example is the film and music quiz because most guys who are experts on Western music and Western films don't know very much about Hindi films and Hindi music. So you used to have two guys who basically knew the West better and two guys who basically knew the other stuff better. And the ability just to be able to say that, okay, I'm going to go with you in this. How do you go with a guy's guess? Because most of quizzing is you don't win it by knowing everything. You win by making educated guesses. And to make an educated guess, so there are 3 guesses up out there, and deciding the right one to go gives you an insight into how that person thinks, how that person does. It's actually a great lesson in terms of being able to read your team and say, okay, you know what, I like your guess better, because you have a sense that this guy, when he guesses, his guesses tend to be more accurate. Somebody else is trying to impress, wants to put a name out there, but is not necessarily very sure of the answer, but he's covering it up well. So knowing that stuff actually is really, really useful. So a quiz team is a great place to start if you want to, get into insights about a team.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I think we all grew up watching quizzes, and somehow outside of KBC, it's not really big on, at least on television right now. But I've seen it's got such a strong following outside of that. Joy, what I wanted to really begin the interaction, and like you said, I like the idea of focus. The idea is to distill from you those elements very selfishly that are relevant to us from this theme. And for that, I want to start with really two sides. Some in terms of if you were to wear your hat as a leader from your broadcasting days to now. What are some of, you would say, are your highlights as a leader? And On the flip side, what do you think are some low points or challenges that, knowing what you know in hindsight, perhaps you would have done differently?
I think lots of interesting highlights, because you look at things and you say that okay, they're easy ones to say highlights. I'd say one of the big highlights was actually uh, first being the first guys to actually do English and Hindi production together. And that was an absolutely amazing experience, because you see, production is a very interesting field. Live television production is a very interesting field. In films, in serials, you can take retakes. And we used to have a very simple lesson. When you start that, what the first producer I worked with told me was, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. Sachin Tendulkar is going to walk out and he's going to face the first ball. If you're on air, you have your job. If you're not on air, you don't have a job. And it's as simple as that. It's a very binary thing. And what it means, therefore, is, and there are 500 factors involved. So if you go to a television broadcast, it's like you have graphics, you have directors, you have switchers, you have cameras, you have sound, you have commentators, you have a whole lot. So there's an ecosystem of 100 people, all of whom need to do their jobs, as to get the things right. And that's the thing about it. The great part about even doing that is, most of the stuff that they know, you don't know. So a sound guy knows more about and why I say this is, suppose you're a guy in sales. Typically, if you're a guy from a hardcore FMCG company in sales in a senior role, you can go and tell a junior guy, you know what, I've done this before. What you have done today, I have done 5 years before. It hasn't changed very much. It may have changed somewhere in the market, in reality, but most of it is the same. Here you're dealing with a guy who knows sound. You know nothing about the way he does sound. They're the camera guys. You know nothing about the way they set up their cameras. There's something called guys called guarantee engineers. Guarantee engineers are guys who are
Mhm.
actually most highly paid in productions. Their job is
Wow.
to make sure everything is up. Because there are so many moving parts to a production. And without them, I mean, and they'll walk around, they look the most arbitrary characters in set, because mostly they're in shorts and t-shirts and they look like nothing. They are paid more than directors and producers, because they are the ones who ensure that the telecast doesn't go down. So what happens then is, if you are going to make all these guys work and work together as a team and actually get things going, in most things that they do, they know their business better than you. Many of them are 15, 20 years older than you. Okay. And many of them are absolute bosses at what they do. And you're also dealing with commentators. So you're going to go and tell Sunil Gavaskar, who's every 34 centuries, test centuries, and one ODI century and 10,122 test runs, by heart. You have to work with him, and you got to get stuff out of him, but nor can you actually capitulate to his every whim, because you wouldn't be a good producer if you're not pushing back gently enough for you to get something out of him.
Hmm.
At the same time, you are not going to come around and tell him that, what, this is how you do your business, because he'll turn around and say, you know perhaps I know that a little better than you do. So I think live television production is very good for that. And when we did English and Hindi together, it was a different ball game, because then your production, the entire complexity of a production almost doubles. And we took this really interesting step about getting Shekhar Suman as a host for Hindi, and being able to train him, putting together. So we did very exciting things out there. Some worked, some didn't work, but I think we really, what we did was we really actually made a difference in live television. We did things that had never been done in India before, and
Yeah.
that was something which is a huge accomplishment, and something I feel very proud about even today.
So if you were to take that the central, what I could glean out of that was the ability to, understand the, put yourself in the shoes of somebody in a hardcore production role who's like a SME and who's siloed and perhaps only knows one thing and does only that one thing, gets a paper, delivers on one side, to a superstar cricketer, commentator, much revered person who's perhaps has a ego, doesn't have an ego on the other side, and being able to map all these parts the essential recognition that I have done things, but I still don't know what everybody knows, right? And
Right.
that if I were to glean that insight out and take it to the other example that you gave me, which is a typical example of a corporate middle to senior manager, I would say somebody who's in that phase, and who's perhaps reached that position because of what they've accomplished, right? And therefore, there's natural tendency to look up to the his or her team, to look up to that person for advice, or look up to that person saying he's perhaps been here where I was. And if a manager, and it need not be only sales, it can be marketing, it can be any function that we look at, right? What is the insight from there that you think you can transpose onto this space? I know the spaces are not the same,
No,
but what could be that core insight?
I think the thing about it is to be able to, the problem is that in roles like that, hierarchies are very height bound. And if you want to get the best out of people, I think one of the big things that we figured out was, how do you actually capture the essence? What is it that Sunil Gavaskar wants to do here, which you can do differently, which you can do better? How can you help Sunil Gavaskar reach his goals better? And don't think all these guys, if Gavaskar has been so successful as a commentator, I mean, from 87 when he retired, he's been a commentator for 38 years. So in 2003, if you're trying to tell him what to do, it's not going to be there. But even then, because he has a drive to do new and interesting things, how do you keep him motivated? How do you give him something to do? And I think that is something that works through the system. It's about keeping a team of everyone, knowing everyone that, okay, this is what they want to do, this is how they want to push it. Because essentially, I've come to the conclusion that unless somebody's deserves to be sacked and doesn't deserve to be in the company at all, everyone, most of the 99% or 95% of the people you'll work with want to do their stuff better. Their ego stops them. Sometimes their ego stops them. Sometimes the hierarchy stops them. Sometimes their job definition stifles them because it doesn't really work for them. And you've got to help your way to entangle them, to get out of that entanglement and work within the system. And there are times when you will actually have conversations, happen with me, where you'll tell this guy saying, this system does not work for you. And there's a very famous case of a guy who was a very, very good producer, but he was not a live producer. At the essence, live production needs you to have a certain amount of nerve, because you're calling live stuff. You cannot afford that. Things are going to happen, which, it's a live game. Things can happen. If you don't have nerve, you can't do it. But I knew he was an excellent, excellent producer for documentary stuff, for stuff where, because he had that. So sometimes you need to have that conversation and say, you know what, live is not your game. But what you can do, what the magic you can do with shooting stuff and putting it together into a whole, is something very different. And I think that is the one thing. The first thing, and let me step back one thing. The first step of doing anything with anyone, even within structures like that, is you need to care. If you don't care, it shows. So first and foremost, if you
Yeah.
have 5 guys or 10 guys working with you, if you don't care, they know it. So then your any task that you're going to do and do is 100 times tougher. You might still not be able to help them, but if they know that, okay, this guy is trying to help me, is trying to understand where I am, see, he is going to still give you 50 to 100% more than he would if he knows you don't care. And
Great.
I think the core of any job function in times like this, especially when it's a very K class development. The good guys have so many options they can't believe, and for the rest, there are very few options. But for the guys on the K side of it, on the upside of the K, if you don't care, they'll walk.
Very, very true. I think that's something I'm going to pick up later, especially with this whole narrative around Gen Zs, and how difficult it is and how they don't care, and how this operating from your own frame, and not allowing and creating space to accept other frames, is really challenging leaders, and managers today, to be able to work with newcomers who know many things 20 times better than you, and can function in ambiguity, and are chill about a few things that you're not. And there is so much that complementary that's available if you're willing to get out of your own way. So that we'll come back to, you know, 2 3 specific themes that I wanted to you know, chat with you about from the space of soft power. But I wanted to flip, you know, the conversation into perhaps a space, and thank you for agreeing to share some of these stories. I know they're not easy, but what do you think are some? I wouldn't call it low points, but I would say some really tough situations where perhaps things didn't work out the way you want, and you learned a lot. And I think for us, that learning is as crucial as you know, learning from some of the success stories that you've had.
I think there are two which stand out for me. One was uh, a story that was the National Geographic Channel, and I'd gone to the National Geographic and History Channel because it was my dream job. As you know, I'm a quizzer. There's so much more beyond sport that I'm interested
Yeah.
in, and this just seemed the place to do it. And then I realized that the structure of how National Geographic operates or history operates is 95% of their content comes into India because the economies of scale mean that you don't make for a particular country. You make, and 50% of the money is recovered from the US market. The remaining 50% is from the 30 odd markets where you're putting out stuff. So you get very little opportunity to actually to actually create stuff for which is your own. So that was the
Hmm.
first frustration. And the second was that, okay, how do I, whenever you go to a job and you go doing something, it's easy enough to, just do the regular things. How do you push the needles? And there were two places where I pushed the needle, and I felt the biggest failure was not being able to actually complete them. The
Hmm.
first was, I come from a background, I come from a mathematics, computer science background. So as you, Bhaskar, you were in research, you'd know. So what I started doing was I started looking at the numbers very carefully. And what used to happen is, as you know, every company has a set of people who are doing the numbers. Thursday, the numbers are declared. National Geographic will come out with a post, on all the agency media saying National Geographic top in so and so channels, so and so, so and so. It's easy. You slice and dice it to how you want
Yeah.
to. Discovery will take out the same, saying that, oh, look, we actually dominated in all these categories. And it's easy to slice and dice. Both of them have guys whose only job is to do that. And I was sitting and I said that, you know what, there's something here. We are so small. Both of us are so small that this is meaningless. So I did an experiment. There was to be something called Planet Earth, which used to be Discovery's flagship show. And I turned around and I said, you know what? When Discovery, that means think, the Discovery is pushing one slot, their flagship show, that's a 2 or 3 crores they spend a year on marketing is just behind that one product. And it's their biggest tentpole for the year. What did I do? I put my shiniest, best content at the same time on our channels, which is totally seems totally counterintuitive.
Hmm.
Okay. Their ratings tripled, my ratings went up 2.5 times as well. And my point was, I said, we are looking at this business all wrong. When when Discovery or National Geographic, firstly, nobody, both of them are thought of as Kutta Billy channels. Nobody actually knows the difference between them. So when I say then it's on National Geographic, I'll go and
I
check.
might be on Discovery. Yeah.
Okay. And what we have to figure out is when we acquire new customers, new viewers, we don't get them from the 5% of each other that we are fighting about. We
Hmm.
get them from the other 95% of the market. So my point is, instead of trying to fight with Discovery and try to fight and get their sales guys and push them in we should be fighting to make our category larger together. And how can we do that? And it was, I think it was really well done, it was really well put together. I just wasn't smart enough to know the right forum to put it, to get it out. Because what happens is that if it comes first in front of a sales first group of people, then their lens says that I'm going to survive out of this competition. You know, I don't growing the market. All this sounds really good to me, but I'm only going to get great bonuses if I, sell X against Discovery and I get my sale versus Discovery. And therefore, even when you have an insight, if you want to really change it, the big thing you have to do is understand how you will actually put something together and see it through. So I put that presentation, I said what we could do and all that. And after 2 months, it fizzled out. And that was that. And it was a huge frustration because I really felt that it was something that could have changed the way we looked at the business.
Yeah, and that's an interesting segue into one of my passion areas, I would say, and something I wanted to explore a lot with you is from what you mentioned. I think the lack of understanding the pulse and the motivation of the
Really?
audience in front perhaps clouded you from and being in your own space and being highly kicked about your own idea, and kind of blinds us from understanding the reality from the other person's point of view, right? And I wanted to segue that I wanted to use that as segue into one of the key discussions I wanted to have with you, which is around empathy. To me, any language that we can give, or any term we can give, or any dimension we look at soft power, all of them, the source is empathy, right? I mean, for all the Marvel junkies out there, it's
And,
like that
and, and
Tesseract,
empathy,
right?
empathy, it's a very funny thing because empathy is not love.
Yeah,
Okay. And I think the greatest lesson from empathy I learned, because I have to jump in out here,
please.
is from my son's twin boys who used to study at Shikshantar. Bhaskar, your daughter Maya used to also
Yeah.
study there. And I learned a lesson once in Shikshantar, which has been really one of the most important lessons I learned in my life. So this is, I think, when the kids were 4 or 5 years old, we got invited. They were senior KG, not yet class one, I think. And the teachers got us into a room, all these parents, 20 odd parents, and said, write down what you want for your children. And we wrote big things. We want our child to be, wise, intelligent, happy, this thing.
Fulfilled.
बहुत words, lots of, vocabulary was used, lots
Yeah.
of this thing was used. And take it from me, it's not that all of us love our children to bits. Okay. Then he stopped and they said, okay, great, that sounds really nice. Now let us open the chits. This is what children say they want from you. Okay. This is what you want from children. What do you think children want? This is what you think you want for the children. What do kids want for themselves? And they said, we want to be taller. Why? Because if you're small, nobody listens to you in the house. Okay. We want more time with you. Okay. We want you to listen to us. You're not listening to us. And then you realize that you had all the love for your child, but you actually didn't have empathy. You actually
Interesting.
did
Yeah.
not understand what they actually wanted.
Yeah.
Because when we love, also, even when we love, we have, we want to give everything to the kids. We're still not actually listening.
Yeah.
And that was for me a revelation. Because I said, you know what? I'm actually not listening. Where else am I doing this where I think I'm doing the best, but I'm not actually listening to you? So I went back to KKR. This is a great story because KKR, we went out there and I said, forget about what we want for the teams. I said, let me listen to what they want. And I'll tell you a very funny one. The guys who come, who play, even from South India, but mostly the North Indians, definitely, they have to have fulkas at night. That's a thing. In North India, you have fulkas at night, hot fulkas. That's what you have. Whether you have it with mutton or chicken or dal or sabzi or paneer, doesn't matter. Fulkas, hot and ready, are what North Indian men seem to crave. Now, ITC could not take they could not make the machine. What they would like to do is, they'd make parathas and take it. So after practice or after a game, guys would get parathas. And the truth of it was, parathas are not as healthy and it's not what they want. Now you may think, yeah, parathas, there are 30 other dishes out there. But that's not important. You will not believe the amount of trouble we went to make sure there was an area, because there's a safety issue. If you put a stove there are hundreds of things you need to look after to get a place where fulkas are actually made. And you think it's small, but it is a huge thing for that player.
Hmm.
Then tickets. Players used to go mad, especially local players used to go mad about tickets because think you're playing for KKR. Your uncle, your niece, your teacher, your boss in office, your daughter's tutor, everybody wants tickets. You never have enough. How do you solve that problem? So we had a ticket group whose only job was to make sure that that player never had to worry about tickets. All these were taken care of. They were sorted. They were
Hmm.
given. We broke them up. We took this entire headache off their head, and we said the moment you get onto the bus to go to the ground, phones are out.
Focus
No
on the.
more about tickets. Nothing. Focus on the
We'll
game.
take care of everything else.
Yeah, you take care of the game. We'll take care of everything else. And that's when you realize that empathy is so much. It's not about love.
Hmm.
A lot of us have love. A lot of us are very warm. It's the thing. Empathy is 90% listening. It's
Great.
listening. You will not believe how much we don't listen.
I couldn't agree more. And it's one of the most talked about topics, even in leadership. But, and that's why I keep going back to there's listening and there's empathetic listening, right? And one, mirror that I see between the world of sports, and you could reflect on whether it's KKR or, any of your other roles that you've played, is that let's take cricket itself, right? There are so many of these talents that we are now seeing that have emerged from from nowhere, practically, right? And they've all made successful careers in KKR, in IPL. Then some of them have gone on to play for the country. Some of them have gone on to perhaps have other careers that they didn't have, using this as a launch pad. But I've always found it interesting that in a room where there is Jacques Callis on one side, and there is, perhaps somebody from, I don't remember the teams from that time, you would know better, somebody from the Boondocks there, and but is talented, right? Is scouted out because you obviously there is science behind it. It's not just randomly picked people. And as a leader of the group, you have a challenge of being able to get the best out of this person, and make a contribution to the team. And in some cases, perhaps they have done even a better job than some of the stars. How do you therefore create an environment for them that they feel safe and comfortable? And yet, the objective is not, like you said, to make them be happy, but make them feel stretched, make them, I mean, push them, but by creating that environment. Because this is a narrative that is time and again plays itself out in the corporate space. There are stars and there are, dark horses. Sometimes dark horses remain in the dark. And to me, it is a leader's imperative to be able to see what drives this person and create that space. And there, I think empathy has a strong role. And I was wondering if you had any, interesting insight stories to
So
share.
I quite a few actually. There are two, three things. Okay, one is actually firstly, I'll just extend my whole theory about story about where we were talking about, in how do you actually get players to feel empathetic and how do you get players to be a team? Because one of the big challenges, and which is very interesting, that uh, I'll give you a good example. 2011 new auction, fresh new team has come for KKR. Nobody knows anyone. 11 nationalities, different players, different coaches, different people, and they're all together and they have 5 days to start a tournament together and start getting something going. So how do you actually make these things happen? And lots of things. So one of the things that I'd say is first you need to walk the talk. Okay. So I'll give you two, three examples of how things happen. One was we were playing that first season, we were playing this match. Jacques Callis was playing, and we were playing this match in Delhi, which was a really meaningless match. And Jacques, batted, didn't do great in the batting. He bowled not really very successfully. He's fielding at long on, and he's basically shifting between long on and deep third man. That means on both sides, he's fielding in the deep because he was a really good fielder, had a great arm. And Firoz Shah Kotla is rock hard. It's a terrible ground and it's an afternoon match. And Jacques kept diving to stop balls, and it was a very tight match. He won by 6 or 7 runs. And Jacques came out of the dressing room. Every time Andrew Lipas, our physio, would jump up, and Jacques would say, "No, don't worry." And Jacques came out and he just lifted his shirt, and from here to here, both sides were just masses of bruises. It was all cut, all of it. And the thing about it was, that was Jacques. Okay. So with Jacques getting a word out of him, 2 words out of him was like dental surgery. But Jacques led by example. Similarly, Gautam, okay, fiery guy. Now, Gautam is not going to be Captain Cool ever in your life. Gautam is not the type. He's the fiery person, very opinionated, fiery, but he really, really backs his players. So, what do you tell your team? So, you pick that star, that Gautam that is there. You pick the quality of Gautam that makes sense to the team. So, you say, you know what, Gautam, and you're talking to the guys, you say, Gautam's not the kind of guy who's going to come around and, sweet talk you, or he's not the coolest guy on the ground. He's going to lose his temper. But you know what? If somebody's going to shoot a bullet at you, he's the guy who's going to stand in front of you. That's the kind of guy he is. So what you need to do is, you're not going to be given this deck of cards which is perfect. You're going to be given a couple of guys, somebody who's really cool, somebody who's not, and you've got to say, which of the characteristics, what is this that I can take out of this person and tell the rest of the team and bring to the rest of the team, you know what, this is what this guy is all about, which is what they can call. Because you're never getting the perfect deck. You're never going to be given the perfect pack of cards. And I think the single most important business of anyone who's dealing with a group of disparate people is to figure out, what is it that I can do with this guy and this guy and this guy? What is it that I can highlight? What is it that I can push, which will make sense to the rest? Remember one thing, cricketers are great admirers of talent. So if you have that ability to be able to do it, great thing about anyone half good at, say, cricket or music or anything is, when you're half good, you know who the best are. Okay, so that is automatically there. Okay, but after that, to get what you want out of them is a matter of being able to figure out which quality of what you get to whom. And it's a very important thing, because it doesn't happen overnight. You need to watch the team. You need to sort of figure out how this dynamic works. And then within that dynamic, you got to put yourself and say, this quality of this person is what we're going to highlight and use. This quality. So Jacques Callis led by example. So Jacques used to go out, and one of the things we used to do, one of the biggest, and it's a very interesting thing, one of the toughest things to do in an IPL match is to set targets when you're batting first. How do you set a target? Is this a 220 pitch? Is it a 240 pitch? We could try for 220 and get all out by 140. Or we could try for 150 and we've sort of let ourselves down because this pitch deserved more. So what would happen was that mostly Jacques and Gautam used to go out to bat first. Okay. And the moment Jacques is out, or whether the first time the drinks break goes out, Jacques would say, this is a 180 pitch. It's a 190 pitch. So very important, because what he did there was, it seems he's immediately setting the expectations, the targets of the guys behind him. The coach is immediately adjusting in his mind, okay, this is what the batting order is, if this is what it looks like to Jacques. And you getting a sense of what you now want to go after. So this is a role. Is this a role that necessarily everyone does? It doesn't. But it's a role you knew that whenever the cricket part of it, the hardcore cricket part of it came, Jacques was a perfect guy to go to. And whenever the leading by example came, Jacques was the guy. So these are the kind of things that you have.
Yeah. I think the point I'm gathering is that one way to demonstrate the empathetic side or the human side is to really kind of be there in the trenches, lead by example, know that you are available, and know that I'm not expecting anything from you that I'm not willing to do myself. Right? And I think the ability to push somebody harder, if it comes from a space, you should come from a space of entitlement, not from your position, but by what you're willing to do for them, right? I'm willing
Yeah.
to, right? And I think there, and that to me is a hallmark of an empathetic leader. And
Yeah, you have to, and you have to lead by example. I
yeah.
remember, as I said, once in Firozshah Kotla, I mean, Yusuf's mother, and there was a match, same match. This is actually the same match where Jacques was there.
Mm.
Yusuf's mom and parents had come to watch because Irfan was playing for Delhi, Yusuf was playing for us. And one cop actually made a rude comment about to their mother, Irfan Yusuf's mother. And I mean, Yusuf was mad as hell. More importantly, he was just really angry. And I said, look, you know what? We are not going to leave. Our bus is not going to leave until this is sorted. And all the other guys bought it. So did the Delhi team. And we stopped it. The guys, they tried their best. They said we've already sent them home. We said, it's okay. Two teams will not go home until we figure out what has happened here. And 15 minutes later, finally, that cop emerges trembling. And Yusuf does not say anything to him. He just says, he catches him and says, yeah, if you guys behave like this, if the police behaves like this, what hope is there for public?
Public.
And after that, he asked me 5 times later that I hope his job is not disturbed. I hope he's okay.
Mm.
But the real thing of the story, the important thing for Yusuf was that the entire team thought it important enough for them, instead of going straight after the match and going back and resting, they were prepared to sit out there because a player, their friend, their colleague had been hurt.
Yeah.
And so that teams can talk all about it. It's all very good to talk about empathy and all that.
Mm.
You have to walk the talk, and especially in sport, it's a very easy thing. People see it for themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to kind of maybe get you to wear your hat more from a sports administration management side of it, because a lot of the people out here, that's their reality.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of, as we are, maybe we've got 10-12 minutes left. So I wanted to kind of move the focus to saying, how does being soft allow you to do the difficult things? Because one of the toughest challenges is that is a challenges a person who's naturally a leader who's naturally a highly human centered, highly soft, is just doing those difficult things itself is difficult, right? The second is, on the flip side, is people who are perhaps a lot more objective, lot more transactional in the way they work. um, they don't they see being soft as a liability in having difficult conversation. They see it as a negative, and something that doesn't get the results. So I wanted to shift the conversation really with 2-3 difficult things, like how dealing with change, having difficult conversations. How do you get through to people who are not like you, right? How do you give feedback, but give it in a manner that inspires the person, right, as opposed to they feel more threatened or challenged. And because this is a conversation that leaders perhaps have every other day, and I
Yeah.
believe there's a space for being fierce, right, by being gentle. And that's what I wanted to just explore with you.
So I'll tell you one thing. The most insecure people on the planet are sports people, and for good reason. All of them know that to be in the place they are, unless their name is Sachin Tendulkar, Jacques Kallis, and there are very few like that who are so talented that nothing can stop them. All the rest know that it took a village to get them there. Lots of luck, lots of people supporting them at the right time, lots of breaks, lots of things, lots of hard work, all of it put together. And they know it's a, when you're playing for India, you're 11 among a billion people, 1.4 billion people, you're the 11 out of their field. It is a very, very special feeling, but it's also a feeling that can be taken away from you at any point. So players, cricketers, all players are fundamentally insecure because they've reached such a height, they know anytime this could be taken away from them. Now take that situation and take the situation that every time you play an IPL game, you have 22, 23 players in your squad, only 11 play. So what do the remaining, can you imagine what is going through the minds of the remaining people? How do you keep them occupied? How do you keep them ready? And how do you keep them still focused to the business in hand? Because tomorrow an injury may happen, a different pitch might require a different solution. They
Yeah.
need to be ready. They can't be switched off. They can't be demotivated. So let me tell you one thing. There is zero easy ways around this. The only way that you get anything out of it, and I can tell you from 7 seasons of experience, the only way you can get something is if the player knows exactly why he is not playing or he or she is not playing and what needs to change for that player to play. Simple. And it cannot be ambiguous. It has to, can't be that, oh, I like your face. This is it. This guy is ahead of you because these are the pitches. This is what we are backing. And unless you're better than this guy will remain playing, or this guy is going to play on all these pitches where there's spin. When it's fast bowling, you're going to get a chance out here. You have to, that player must, this is what I need to do. This is what needs to happen. And this is the only thing that can change. And it must be unambiguous.
Hmm.
You can't tell him, "Arey, nahi, nahi, play thoda beta or thoda practice kar."
Hmm.
Because players have heard this bullshit all their lives. They just distrust you after that. So you have to say,
Hmm.
"Nahi, yaar, till Brendan McCullum is playing, you're not going to get a chance." But look, this is the situation. And it actually happened because, in 2012, Brendan McCullum was playing most of the matches. But what happened was in the semi final, or sort of qualifier against Delhi, Balaji got injured. So you may say, how does that matter? Balaji gets injured. We need another fast bowler to come in. The only other fast bowler of that quality is Brett Lee. So Brett Lee comes in. But if Brett Lee comes in, we have 4 international players. So we need to drop one of the international players. And so Brendan has to miss out in the finals. In walks Manvinder Bisla, who's played basically 3 matches before this, scores 89 and 49 balls and wins the match for KKR. But he was throughout ready. He knows that if there's a situation that Brendan does not play, I'm ready to go.
Hmm.
And I think that is the important thing. You can't bullshit players because players have an automatic bullshit meter that is stronger than
Yeah, I
anything else.
think most of us do once you're. I mean, it's true outside of sport as well.
Yeah. So that's the point. So that's what I believe. You have to be totally, utterly, transparently honest about what their situation is, what they need to change, or what change in the market atmosphere or the organization could lead to them going somewhere else or getting that promotion or getting that raise. You need to be transparent about it. And if you're wrong, and you will be, because sometimes the company will tell you things that they change on, you'll have to say, "This is what I heard, this is what is there, I'm sorry. This was the best I knew under these circumstances." And if you can be uncompromisingly honest there, their soft peddling is a bad idea.
Hmm.
You've got to be very honest. You can't say, "Beta, nee, you're very talented." You have to say, "Boss, there are guys ahead of you. You're probably not going to make it this time." And for that to change, either these guys need to leave or you need to do a hell of a lot more. And you need to be honest about that. You need to be absolutely honest about that.
So I think if I take one of the things that you mentioned earlier, I think at the start of our chat, you said that foundationally a leader has to care, and that's inherently human about us, right? I mean, one of the things that drives us every day is to make good for the people we care about, right? So whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's uh, children, parents, right? So, I mean, our care for someone drives us to do everything we do every day, right? Now, in order to have um, that hard conversation, I think if you have fundamentally shown that you care, if you fundamentally understand their reality and put yourself in their shoes and imagine what life is like, I think, and you've demonstrated that every day, I think you've kind of earned your right to have that frank and open conversation. You cannot have that conversation from a distance,
No, you cannot.
right? And
I
then
totally
you
agree.
only are using your position, in the hierarchy of things, to get your point across, and not really. And when a situation like this happen and you need your bench to perform, the bench is not as motivated as you want it to be.
Yeah.
And I'm just reflecting on all these gigantic layoffs that are happening across the world, especially in the tech space. And I really wonder, a guy who's sat in an interview and has heard glowing tributes about the organization and their culture and stuff like that from someone, and 9 months later or 6 months later, they have been told that, sorry, that's it. Right? I really wonder if the organization has earned its right to put themselves in a position to. I'm sure that nobody's doing it because nobody's liking what they're doing, right? I'm sure when they were hired, they were they were sincere in their idea of having that bench available to perform, to take on new projects and stuff. And the ever evolving tech space is forcing them to make hard decisions. But have you really earned your right to have that difficult conversation? Is where the human touch really comes to the fore. I wanted to use this to talk about one of the last things I wanted to discuss. Really was, if you see many of the leaders today, and if you take up org hierarchy, you have the people right in the front line, people who are new coming into the workforce. Then you have the middle layer, very large middle layer, all of whom are essentially leaders in a transitional role. Either you are a first-time leader and leading new teams, you are a middle manager, kind of been there for a while. Then you're kind of in the senior management role, but not yet in the leadership. But if you see, culture is always the responsibility. It flows top down, right? And therefore, um, with so many young, I don't know what it is now. Is it A or is it B? Gen what? I don't know. It is, right. It keeps shifting regularly. But let me just broadly say, a whole bunch of youngsters who are coming into the workforce um, are having to deal with managers who don't have the luxury of time or space. They have deliverables, and they have deliverables today, right? And therefore they need quick action. They need to be ready. And the organization goals or the culture, apart from the goals, the culture is really being driven by your senior guys, and not being able to really understand what ticks, what makes these youngsters tick, what drives these people, is perhaps creating that gap and not enabling the frontline managers who have to deal with this group on a day-to-day basis. They're not being enabled well enough to handle this and get the best out of them. And all our conversation has been about getting the best. So as a really a closing thought, before I ask you a couple of closing questions, I wanted to really, I know so much has been said and so much has been written about it. What are one or two uncliched things, Joy, that you can really leave us with in terms of dealing with this new force? So I think just amazing at how fast they learn things and how adept they are at so many things. And how do you really think? What can you leave as a message for managers out there?
So I think the only one thing you can do is, when you have a group of a lot of people, there's lots that they do differently from you. There are lots that they know differently from you. There are lots that they're brought up to. You have to find one thing that they all coalesce in. So, for example, for us during the Under 17 World Cup, our first employee was Keshav, who was 70 years old, and he was the retired teamman of AIFF who we took and we got him to work with us. And our youngest employee was 22, 21, and you had 350 people who joined in the course of, in the last 6 months, you had 300 odd people joining in 6 places. How do you get a common culture? And we said, what? So Javier and me thought about it a lot. And the one thing we hit on was, what is an Under 17 World Cup? It's various things you're doing. And you really don't know what your next challenge is. Because it's so much of this space is undocumented. It's not as if there's a regular thing. You're all working towards an event which is a one-off, it will happen and go. And every one-off event is different in its own way. So our only cultural thing that we pushed through the system was You can argue, you can fight, you can do whatever. Nobody can turn around, look at something and say, this is not my job. So Javier and me have carried bottles of water up there during the match because the security stopped, the Prime Minister's security stopped everyone else from going who didn't have a badge. So our water carriers couldn't take water. We have taken water up, we have cleaned bathrooms. We did whatever was required. So the culture of the organization is, if it's there and it's there to be done, you do it. Don't wait for somebody else and say that's your job. Just do it, finish. And it's a simple message. So all I'm saying is, if in the company you have something in that culture which is one message that percolates easily through, then the rest of it, their individual wrinkles will work out. But you must. That's why it's important for companies to have culture, especially when you have such a varied workforce. It's important to have a culture and something that you can believe in, that any manager can say, okay, this is how we operate, this is how we are. And I think it's important.
Great. I wish we could go on and on, but people have, it's a Friday evening, people have places to go and things to do. So before we close, Joy, and maybe at a later point in time we do this again because I've got 17 other things to talk to you about. But before we leave, if you imagine I am, say 10 years in, 15 years in, I could be in any field. I'm really in that managerial role where I have strategic outcomes that I'm looking at, that I'm aware of, that this is where we want to go. And there are ephemeral goals, day-to-day things that I need to be, that I need to deliver, because that's what ultimately I am there for. And I have a whole lot of variety of people to deal with, both within the organization, multiple stakeholders, across functions outside the organizations, and I need to pull all these things and make it work. If you can, and I know this is not scripted, so you'll have to freewheel a bit here, is that if you were to leave them with one or two things that you think that, from the lens of the real focus of this series really is that, how can you tap into what is core about the human element, and how can you use that to navigate this reality which perhaps 70% of management layer of an organization really represents and is perhaps dealing with every day? What do you think, one or two things you would leave with them, that is not about strategy, that is not about functional capability, but it's really about being, tapping into that human element?
I have a very simple one, and most of us don't do it enough, and I've been equally guilty in my own time. Invest time in speaking with people. There is no other way to know them. Uh, 30 emails, 30 briefing documents, one on one, one on two, one on three discussions with people. Spending time with people is the single most important thing you'll do. And as you realize, the more you're getting automated, the more functions, the things that we used to take time don't take time anymore, thanks to AI, thanks to tools. This is the single most important thing you want to do.
Yeah.
Invest your time with people and work with them to understand them better. And there's nothing which works more than that.
and you can't put an AI to do that.
You
So
can't put an AI to do that. You can't replace it. You
delegate
cannot
it.
replace human interaction, human insight. You cannot replace. And also, when you're spending time with people, listen also. And I keep saying, listening is the single most important art of any manager, and it's the most underrated and yet most important thing that we have to do. Listen, actually listen. Don't wait for your
So,
turn to.
so I think basically you're going back to first principles, of people management, and spending time with people finally takes care of everything else that that you spoke about. So on that note, thanks, Joy. Thanks for your time. Lovely conversations, lovely stories. I've always enjoyed listening to your anecdotes, and you have so many of them. And I wish we get to do this once more. and I distill more stories from you with another lens in mind. Thank you again, and thank you everybody for being with us. And hope you'll join us for the next episode happening next month. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks, Joy.
Thanks you so much, Bhaskar.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.